All right, Erin, thanks for joining us here at Under the Hard Hat. First thing, just want to kind of get a brief background about you. Can you take us back to the start of your career? Tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you kind of bring to the table currently.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here. Um, so I am a civil engineer by trade. And when I was completing my degree, I ended up doing an internship for a construction company for 16 months. And I would say I was officially bitten by the construction bug during that time and developed my love for it. I had a number of people ask me as I was completing my degree, why aren't you going into design? Why aren't you becoming a consultant? And I'm like, I got to figure out how things go together before I can start telling people how to build things. And I guess maybe I never learned because I never actually went back to consulting or anything like that. I stayed in construction for the next 22 years. So yeah, I worked on a variety of projects in commercial, civil, light industrial, and heavy industrial projects in the Alberta area over that course of time. Project management, technical sales, ultimately ended up leading construction teams by the end of that career. And
Mm,
then slowly, towards the end of, I say the end of my career, my career isn't over, but um, probably around the 20-year mark, I sort of really decided, like I got very curious about leadership. I was myself in a leadership role. I was watching kind of these new grads and, come into the organization and learn how to lead construction projects. And so I sort of started this kind of dual career path where I was developing and leading projects, but also doing leadership development work inside the organization that I was at.
mm,
And when the pandemic hit, I was asked to pause the leadership development work and really help focus on how do we deliver projects during that time. And what I noticed for myself is I really missed the leadership development work. And it was then that I kind of listened to the nudge and the calling and the inside voice that said,
mm,
maybe this is something you want to sink your teeth into. And so at the end of 2020, I um, stepped away from my construction delivery career and moved into a leadership development and coaching career. And so for the last 5 years, that's where I have been training, facilitating, coaching, developing sort of the next generation of leaders, not only in construction and engineering, but mainly in technical industries.
mm.
Um, and it's been a blast. So that's where I'm currently at.
That's amazing. What a career so far.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in regards to that transition, you mentioned that you were kind of in the middle of picking between the two roles of like leadership and what you were currently before.
Yeah.
What was kind of the main decision, the driver behind
Mm.
there that made
It's a
you
good
turn
question.
into the leadership?
Yeah, great question. So in in 2016, I had a personal experience with a leader that I had had, and so up until that point, I wouldn't say I had amazing leadership in my career. I had people who cared for me, but I would say I always felt like an outsider. I felt like I was a little bit
Mm,
different. Like, did I really fit into construction? Um, and a lot of the mentorship and advice and direction that I was given by the leaders and mentors that I had up until that point were very much like, toughen up, get a game face, very traditional
mm,
models of leadership, very command and control, which is not at all my natural style. I like to have a plan and I like to know where we're headed. But as far as how we get there, my natural style is a bit more collaborative.
mm,
And I had this experience in 2016. So my daughter was diagnosed with some learning disabilities. She was in grade 6, and it was a really rough moment for our entire family. And I remember my husband and I were both engineers, we're both good problem solvers. So we built this plan where I was going to quit my job and support my daughter and figure out however long that took. And I
mm,
went in to inform my leader that I was quitting my job. And he took time to really explore what was going on with me, and he asked some great questions. And then he said, something to the effect of like, are you open to exploring different options? And I said, well, I
Mm,
don't really know how many different options there are. I need to quit my job and support my daughter. And he goes, I totally hear you. And I know that you need to take a step back and support your daughter. I think there's a different way we could go about doing this. Are you open to listening? And I'm like, sure, I'll listen. I don't think you're going
mm,
to change my mind, but I'll listen. Right. I'm a good problem solver. And it was so great because the timing of my conversation with him was early February and bonuses came out late March. And
mm.
he said, would you be willing to stay on until the end of March? So, you'd given me your 2 weeks today, which would have taken us kind of to the end of February. Can you give me an extra 4 weeks so that I can get you your bonus?
Right.
And I'm like, that's a pretty good idea. Never thought about that in my like blinders on way to
Yeah.
just like deal with this kind of crisis that I had at home. I really wasn't thinking big picture, which I think is very true for us when we get
Mm,
into more highly agitated kind of crisis states. So I said, sure, I can do that. I can stay till the end of March. And then he said, instead of quitting, would you be, could we apply for a leave of absence so that you have a job to come back to when this
mm,
settles down? Because I know you're going to figure this out and your daughter's going to be okay. And I get that you just need some time. But I'd really like for you to not have to worry about what are you going back to?
mm.
And
Wow.
again, I'm like, wow, like never had I had this kind of experience in a leader
Mm,
before. And that was 2016. It got me really curious about like, what did he do in this moment? Like that was some magic stuff going on there,
yeah.
because like, so it got me really curious. And when I kind of dug into it and I really started to understand, what bubbled up to the surface for me was really like, that was a masterclass in empathy of just how to
Mm,
connect with somebody, how to really see what was going on, how to understand what I was going through, what I needed, what my goals were, but also help me navigate that situation in a way that I couldn't see that really
mm-hmm.
benefited both of us.
Right. Yeah.
And so out of that, I started writing and journaling, and I had a mentor at the time, and I was kind of sharing my thoughts with her. And she's like, you've got a book here. Like, this needs to be shared. I'm like, I'm an engineer, not a writer. I don't, being an author was never on the dream list for Erin. But again, sometimes, these twists of fates and fork in the road, you got to pay attention to the nudges
Definitely.
of the universe. And so I put it in front of an editor. Next thing you know, Erin has a book published. So that came
Wow.
out the end of 2017. And so I would say it's kind of that experience of, my lived experience with this leader and publishing the book that really got me curious about leadership.
Mm,
And I couldn't see at that time how my career would unfold into leadership development, but I
right.
just kept following kind of the little breadcrumbs and the next step.
Right. That's kind of the signal.
That was the invitation.
Right on. Wow. That's an incredible story. And
Yeah.
it just kind of goes to show of how careers can take a turn that you least expect.
Yeah, you got to pay attention to those nudges. And like I would say too, follow your curiosities.
Mm,
I mean, I didn't start engineering with the goal of being in construction,
mm-hmm.
right? I got this great opportunity and internship and I absolutely loved it. And so it was like, all right, let's go.
Right on. Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think construction is like a field that more people should be paying attention to? Because I do feel
Mm,
like it's kind of one of those things that tends to fly under the radar.
yeah,
People don't think of it as the first choice as a career choice. Yet there's so much that goes on in there, and there's so many different roles. What is your
absolutely.
kind of experience like that? And did you kind of have an eye-opening experience when you went into construction? It sounds like you did.
I did. Um, First of all, I don't think when we think about construction, we think about like the professionals that are in construction. I think we think about the trades that are in construction.
Hmm.
And there's room for both of us. And so I think whether you're taking kind of a more like professional university degree approach versus a trade approach, there's room for everybody. Um, and I'm also pleasantly surprised. So I now have kids who have graduated high school and are moving out into the world. And the conversation around trades has drastically changed since when I was in university and
Mm,
just graduating high school. I think the trades used to be sort of viewed as like those of you that couldn't cut it in university went into the trades.
mm,
And I will tell you, with my sons and my daughters' classes, it is much more of a choice. It's like I could go to university, but I just really want to start working and I want to get my apprenticeship, and I'm hands-on and I want to build things and see things and make a difference that way. And so, like in my son's group of friends, I will say 50% of them went to university, 50% of them went into the trades. And I think it's
mm.
so, I love that, because I think
Yeah.
there's, and also we were never told that like you can own a business in the trades. You can, like it's, there's so much opportunity in that pathway as well. Um, but the thing I think I love the most about construction is I've been able to drive my kids to projects that I built and was a part
Mm.
of. We've stayed in hotels that I built, and like,
Oh, that's super
I'm
cool.
like, I remember when there was no rooms and moving the furniture in, and I can tell them all of these really cool stories and they're like, "Oh, that's really cool. My mom did that." And I think that's been the best part for me of it, is just to those reminders that you were a part of something that's like there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's exactly, you hit it on the nail there. I feel like construction in the whole field in terms of professionals, trades, is a very rewarding career if you look at it in that certain light.
Yes.
And I think
Yeah.
that's why the younger generation is kind of following through with that. I
Yeah.
think there's lots of careers to be pursued there, and even better, the business side of it,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
something that is very underexplored or not really talked about as often, and something that we definitely want to highlight here, because there's tons of businesses that are running right now,
Absolutely.
that, are basically the backbone of the economy. And
Yeah,
if you think
absolutely.
about it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when it comes to, your work and your impact, um, you kind of coined something called tactical empathy.
Mm,
Can you explain what that means in simple terms for our listeners, and why you think it's also so important for leadership?
yeah, for sure. I think, for me, when I started talking about empathy kind of back in 2016, 2017, what I noticed is a lot of people would be like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that soft skill still like puts my back up." And I'm kind of, a lot of people think that if I'm understanding and nice, then I can't hold a boundary and an expectation.
Mm,
And so through the evolution of the work over the past kind of 5 years, 6 years, I actually think, leaning in and understanding somebody's circumstance, their perspective, their feelings about something, their opinions about, a certain thing, um, and holding an expectation or a boundary or a goal is how we move our industry forward. And I think
mm,
it takes both and. It's not just this like lay the hammer down with an expectation,
mm,
because we have multi generations. We all know that we have different ways of looking at the world, different lived experiences, different needs, different wants, different desires, different feelings, opinions, perspectives. All the things are different among those generations. And it's only when we can unlock that difference and really explore it that we get the power of the generations.
mm,
Right. And so if we want the best problem solving, the most innovation, the best collaboration, um, we have to take time to understand each other while holding the expectation of, greatness, of
mm.
delivering a good or great product, of customer service, of, all these expectations that we've had in the industry for years and years, but we've kind of approached them with more of like a command and control, kind of lay the hammer down approach.
Yeah.
And so for me, tactical empathy is the blending of the two. Is right. It's deploying empathy in a very strategic and tactical manner, so that we can build understanding, so that we can see what the owner and the contractor and the developer and the designer all want,
Mhm.
and still get to a really great product at the end.
Yeah, wow. That's a great explanation. And I mean, when it comes to the different fields in construction, one of the things that I think this field often, talks about is just like the miscommunication that can occur, right? Especially between the two different fields. And then I think that's all set on different types of expectations. So
Yeah,
when it comes to the tactical empathy component, how would you kind of go about, you know, employing it in these kind of scenarios where you do have miscommunication between the fields?
absolutely. I have many, many examples from my career, but the one that kind of sticks out most is from my last project that I delivered. And we had a new building tying into an old building. So an existing building that was there, and we had to build this like tunnel walkway thing and tie it in.
Mhm.
Building envelope is always complicated. For those of us in the industry that know anything about building envelope, it's always complicated. And 9 times out of 10 not drawn 100% correctly on the drawings and requires a lot of interpretation and fussing in the field.
Mhm.
Add in the element of tying into an old building where you don't know the building envelope, and anyway, we had all these issues that popped up.
Mhm.
So and you're I just want to go back to with the comment. I think our industry traditionally has set up a very adversarial relationship between designer, contractor, owner, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like we got to go to battle. We armor
Mhm.
up, we got to protect our interests, we got to fight for what we need and want, and everybody gets around the table and it's this argument and kind of
Mhm.
who's got the most stamina to win the argument. And in this last project that I led, I was very mindful of kind of putting into practice what I was preaching and talking about, because I wanted to see if it would work, right? Before I placed all my, you know, chips down on this new career, I'm like, I got to
Yeah.
see if this is actually going to work. So we had this situation with the building envelope. And of course, the way it was drawn, my contractors were like, we can't build it this way. The owner's like, I just need it done by a certain date. The designer's like, I want it built the way I drew it. The contractor's like, I can't do it. So I'm like, all right, what are we going to do here? Right.
Mhm.
So we got everyone in a room, and, I'm like, designer, what's most important to you? Like, talk to me about the aesthetic. What is it you want to see, don't want to see? Contractor, what are the pieces that you're most concerned with, and it's around integrity, warranty, like I got to make sure this thing doesn't leak.
Mhm.
They don't really care that it looks pretty.
Right.
Let's be honest. They want it to function.
Yeah.
An owner, I'm like, what's important to you? He's like, I got to have this thing open by a certain date, and it can't cost me any more money than what we've already committed to do this thing. Great. We now know everybody's priorities. So now can we start working towards a solution that meets all of those three criterias? And what we
Mhm.
ended up doing is the contractor came up with a great idea. They're like, we can do two different mock-ups. We'll do one on this end and one on this end, and we'll see which one you like better. And both will cost the same. It's just two different ways of approaching the problem. So they went out the next day. We had two different mock-ups. The architect came out and looked at them. I like that one. Problem solved. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was like we didn't have to battle it out. Everybody got what they needed. But I think sometimes we don't take time to really understand what the need is,
Mm.
which is the empathy piece,
Yeah.
and then go, okay, how do we get there?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that whole project was filled with situations like that, and it was multiple conversations around what's the real need, how do we make that happen, and it was great. We all had a great time, and we all liked each other at the end of it, and we delivered the project on budget and on schedule, which hardly ever happens in construction. So
Yeah. I was
it
gonna
felt
say.
like a big win.
That's amazing. Yeah. And it's kind of what you talk to is just getting down to the needs, it sounds like, is
Yeah.
that empathy component. I
Yeah.
feel like oftentimes people want to, put their priorities first. And
100%.
obviously, it's equally important to consider those, but oftentimes we don't really consider the other person's needs
Yeah.
and wants. And when we can kind of realign those, that seems to have, help us out in terms of project management, even just creating better relationships,
Yeah.
and moving forward. So
I think
definitely.
traditionally the industry has been either or. And what my vision for our industry is that it's a
Mm,
both and, right?
right.
How does the designer get what they need, and the contractor get what they need, and the owner get what they need, and the client, like how do we all get what we need?
Right. So when it comes to this component, you mentioned that whole scenario. What would you say would be like the tools of the tactical component?
Mm.
to have this happen on a regular basis, because we can talk about it, we can understand empathy, but what are the ways that we can actually apply it in the field on a regular basis?
So, first and foremost, you have to know your own triggers. And the only way we can all be in this conversation of understanding is if we're actually regulated. And so often, what happens in construction is we get dysregulated. We feel threatened by whoever. The owner isn't going to pay, the designer isn't going to approve, the contractor is going to take a shortcut. Like, there's all different ways we've been either, beliefs we've held about the industry, ways we've been wronged in the industry.
Mm,
And so it really starts with knowing and understanding your own triggers, but also doing the work to like frame your mind of like, what is the opportunity here? And what I will say is on that project, every time a problem came up, instead of seeing it as like, oh, the designers missed this, the owners missed that, we missed this, like the contractor didn't show up. It was like, what's the opportunity here? How can
mm,
I use this opportunity to strengthen a relationship, to find a better solution, to bring someone in and make them feel involved in the project? But you can only do that when you see this person, whoever's sitting across the table from you, as a whole human being that also has some priorities,
mm,
right? Like you said, some needs. And it's just
yeah,
like, what's the need? Can I help you meet it? Um, and so it's a mind shift, like it's a mindset shift around like, hey, we're all in this together. We all have the same ultimate goal, which is the project.
yeah.
I had to remind the team many, many times, like everybody wants the project built.
Hmm.
That's the main goal. We all have that in common. Um, and many times in conversations, like I had to lean on the tools of regulating myself, regulating my team, reminding people of the goal, reminding people that we're all in this together, giving people breaks to
Hmm.
come back to the conversation, not trying to force a decision right now. Like, hey, let's take 5 minutes, go think about it, come back to the table.
Yeah.
Um, and then constantly, asking enough questions to really understand the other person's perspectives and needs and wants, while also being able to represent my needs and wants as the contractor,
Yeah.
and to keep bringing the conversation back to how do we do both and instead of either or.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, definitely a component of the either or seems to be like a very plaguing thing in construction.
100%. Yeah.
So I can totally understand in terms of how that, and component, like how can we do this together? How
Yeah.
can we meet both of our needs in this case and
Yeah.
scenario, or at least to the best of our abilities would help in the future. That definitely makes total sense. When it comes to, yourself and regulating yourself on that component, it can be really hard, especially with all the emotions, being charged up whenever you run into an issue. What would be like some suggestions that you would give to somebody that's in the field that's struggling with like some kind of issue that comes up? Because it's inevitable, it's going to happen. Projects are going to get delayed. What would you say are the biggest tools you use to be able to regulate those emotions at the time?
Here's the advice that I wish somebody would have given me when I first started out, because it took me 10 years of hearing you're too emotional,
Mm,
but not being given any real tangible things to do to fix that. What I thought they were saying was stop feeling. That's what I thought they were trying to teach me how to do. Um, all of us feel, first of all. I think there is a gender difference in how we express. I would fully will admit I have shed tears around a construction boardroom table before because the feelings were so overwhelming. I've also watched male colleagues of mine bury hammers in the wall, throw chairs across the room. Like, these are not ways I would express emotion,
Mm.
but they're the ways that emotion gets expressed on a job site sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think we all express it. I think the thing that I needed to hear was, first and foremost, you got to feel it. You got to name it to be able to, the saying is you got to name it to tame it, right? Like,
Mm.
so don't try to pretend like you're not upset or angry or feeling hurt or disappointed or happy or joyful or whatever it is. Like, the goal is not this even line. The goal is, I'm going to name whatever I'm feeling and then I can work through it. Because the
Yeah.
more we try to hide and suppress it, the bigger it gets and the more pressure we put around it. And then what happens is somebody looks at you sideways or says something like, oh, hey, that delivery is going to be a couple days late, and you lose it.
Yeah.
And it's not about the delivery. It was about all the other things that you were trying not to feel before that moment.
Mm.
So, quite often as I got later and later in my career, I would be like, today is a rough day. Like, I've had a lot of bad news. I don't have a lot of patience. The kids were up all night, whatever it was. Like, I was much more open with what is my capacity and what am I feeling today?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think, once you can name it, then you can start to do, okay, what do I need? Would be the second question. And a lot of times, again, later in my career, it would be like, you know what, Erin, before you make this decision, just go for a 5-minute walk. Like, get up from your desk, get some fresh air, have a little walk, clear your head, because you're probably going to make a better decision,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Um, and in doing those two things, what it allowed me to do was build the capacity to, one, name and see my feelings earlier, and then two, kind of know what I needed to do to regulate myself. So whether that was a walk, whether that was deferring a decision till the next day.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're early in your career, everything feels like a panic and everything feels like an urgent thing.
Yeah.
And what you learn later on is, like, a lot of things can wait 24 hours, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, do I have the capacity today to do my best? And am I at my best to make that decision, or to
Mm-hmm.
have that conversation? Um, I think the other thing that, once you do that, is you begin to recognize the stories you tell yourself about certain situations. And I got a lot better at just saying, so I would, like, okay, I'm recognizing that I'm feeling angry about the delivery being late. Okay, let's go for a walk and figure that out. Okay, I've identified that. Then I could get on the phone with the trade and be like, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you guys have not prioritized this project. Is that correct? Because
Mm.
that's really where my anger was coming from, right? Is I
Right.
had immediately told myself this story that my project is low priority. And they'd be like, no, we've been working on it, for the last 3 weeks. We're actually diverting a shipment from somewhere else to your project. And I'm like, oh, okay, you do care. So
Mm-hmm.
now I have a totally different way of showing up with that contractor or that trade, where I'm like, all right, what can I do to support you in getting that? Like, do you need lay down area? Like, how can we work together? So it's just, a lot of the times we build up a story that isn't true,
Mm-hmm.
and we act
Oh
from
yeah.
that story that isn't true. And then it forces other people into story that isn't true. So recognizing our own feelings, creating space for them to just, give yourself what you need to feel the thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
really testing our stories
Yeah.
is so important. And just, my kids, my husband, my team, they will all tell you, I use this phrase a lot. The story I'm telling myself right now is,
Mm.
you know, and then they can validate if it's true or not.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful tool when you phrase
Mm-hmm.
it like that, because it almost opens up the conversation for the other person to really chime in without like being necessarily told that is the story. It's like,
Right?
this is
It's,
just what I'm hearing, but I
yep.
could be wrong, right?
It,
In
oh,
and of
yeah.
itself.
It lowers the defensiveness, right? So they can
Hmm.
go, yeah, actually, we have deprioritized your project. Okay, now I know what's going on. Or
Yeah.
No, we haven't. We've actually taken shipment from other, jobs and tried to make this work. It's like, okay, I have a totally different reaction to that now.
Yeah, I mean, I could totally see how that would be a very useful tool and a
Yeah.
great way to approach these kind of really difficult situations, conversations,
Yeah.
and just being able to get your kind of like cool around it, right? Because it's very easy to lose your cool if you come in with the emotions hot, thinking that somebody was actually doing you wrong, when in
Yeah.
fact maybe it wasn't the case, right?
Yeah.
And it's about
Yeah.
exploring that avenue.
Yeah.
So that's really great tools. Thanks for sharing. I think that's something that will be very useful for anybody listening. I have a question for you. Why do
Yeah.
you think industries like construction in general, that whole kind of engineering field, has been slower to talk about or adopt this kind of emotionally intelligent leadership? Like, what do you think has been the thing that slowed it down? Or do you think it's even been slower? I'm just curious. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
I do think it's been slower. I think it stems from, just more traditional ways that the industry was led. You look back, it kind of attracted a very narrow, what's the word? It's escaped me. Like a narrow demographic
Mm,
of people, right? That kind of had similar thoughts, similar perspectives, similar ways of thinking. Um, and it worked. That's the key. It worked. And so when something works, as human beings, we like certainty. We
mm,
like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
yeah.
And there is
Yeah.
this mentality in construction that it's working. And we've got decades and centuries of it working this old way before. What we need to start paying attention to is it working now?
Mm,
And I think, the rates of turnover, the struggles to maintain and keep people in the trades, the attraction, the retention, those numbers in our industry would tell us that our current ways of leading are not working,
mm,
because we have a much broader demographic
yeah.
that we are attracting to the industry. We have a broader demographic that we're attracting, and there's more choice
Yeah.
in how people make their money. Construction used to be one of the better choices for people to establish and make a career in. There's many choices now, so there's more choice. There's a broader demographic. It requires more of our leadership to be more emotionally intelligent so that they can actually lead a broader demographic of people that have different needs and wants.
Yeah, yeah, I totally, yeah, understand that. In terms of the leadership, when you look at construction, it's also been mostly male dominated. So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily surprising that, empathy wasn't, on the top of the priorities, as generally that's not something that males were super strong in, especially when we look at, decades ago. It's definitely changed now. We've seen a different shift in that. There's been a lot more conversation about mental health,
Mm-hmm.
all the struggles that people are going through. So it's not like it's not on the top priority anymore, but we still do see that kind of culture, be pervasive and continue forward.
Yeah.
Um,
And I don't think it served everybody before. I think it worked well enough, and enough people kind of could muddle through it, and figure it out, that again, because we're humans and we don't like change, we sort of said, okay, it's good enough.
yeah,
I don't think it ever was a place where people thrived. Let's be honest. There was a lot of sacrifice, personally, professionally. And I'd even say the women that grew up kind of, that, there were a few, and I'm definitely one of them, where I kind of thought I had to learn that style of leadership.
mhm,
Um, it didn't serve us either.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. So when it comes to leaders that are, leading the companies today or making these kind of tough decisions, having tough conversations at work, where do you suggest they start with kind of the empathy component? What do you think is like the one thing they should start with?
So the book is titled Inside Out Empathy for a reason. I think it starts with ourself first. I think we're hardest on ourselves. And where we are hard on ourselves, we are also more likely to be hard on our teams in those aspects.
Mm,
So we have to start with our own self empathy, our own grace, our own mindfulness, our own just remembering that everyone's fighting a battle. We're all in this together. Everybody's got a life. Everybody's got a situation that they're dealing with. Um, and if we can start to kind of see our own situations, our own feelings, it allows for us then to connect better with others in those things. When we hide ourselves, when we push down our feelings, when we pretend everything's okay, then that is the expectation we go into conversations and situations, that everyone else is hiding and okay and just going to
Mm,
grin and bear it. And that's not the truth. Um, so we got to do our own work first. We got to get good at recognizing our own feelings, our own limits, our own capabilities, our own judgments. And then we can sit in conversation and practice that with others.
mm.
And it's not to let them off the hook. It's to say, here's the expectation and here's the goal. And we still got to deliver a project and we still got to meet a deadline. And I know you got a lot going on at home and I see that you got this. How are we going to get there? What do you need to be supported to meet that? Instead of just like throwing the hammer down around the goal and the expectation.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. I think that's excellent advice, and I mean, it's something that we definitely need in the construction industry to kind of think through. When it comes to your services and what you provide, I just want to kind of touch on that so people know
Sure.
what you're able to bring to the team, and what you're kind of doing right now.
Yeah, thank you. Um, so we do everything from lunch and learn style workshops to, multi-day learning experiences for teams, either intact or kind of a group of leaders across an organization, all different types of topics, from the tactical empathy workshop that we have created here to some of the most cutting edge kind of leadership development products. So we're authorized to deal in DISC, 5 behaviors, and the suite of Blanchard products, which includes SL2. Um, and and then we do group and one-on-one coaching. And I also do some keynote speaking to different audiences, at kind of town halls or kickoffs, these types of events. So yeah, there's a whole lot of things we're able to do.
Sweet. If somebody's wanting to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Yeah. So the website is www.erinthorp.ca. There's no E on Thorpe if you're listening, because most people want to spell it with an E, and that is an entirely different Erin Thorp with a different suite of services. And they feel free to reach out via email, which is hello@erinthorp.ca as well.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Erin, for being on the podcast. It's been an
Yeah, thank
absolute
you.
pleasure having you here. Best of luck, obviously, in your career and leadership. And yeah, just thank you so much for being on here for us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Alex.
Yeah, no problem.